Ever heard of the man who burned down the White House? It sounds like a myth, right? But in 1814, it actually happened. The man behind it was a British Major General named Robert Ross. And here's the crazy part. Despite this audacious act, his name is almost completely forgotten today. How does someone who struck at the very heart of America just vanish from history? Well, that's the story we are diving into. Let's set the scene. It's the War of 1812, a conflict often overshadowed by the Napoleonic Wars happening in Europe. America had declared war on Britain for a few reasons: trade restrictions, the British practice of impressing American sailors into their navy, and British support for Native American tribes resisting American expansion. For the first 2 years, the British were mostly busy fighting Napoleon. But in 1814, Napoleon was defeated and exiled. Suddenly, the full might of the British military was free to turn its attention to the upstart United States. And they were out for revenge. Enter Major General Robert Ross. Born in Ireland, Ross was a career soldier, a veteran of the brutal Peninsular War against Napoleon's forces. He was known as a brilliant tactician, respected by his men, and considered a gentleman officer. He wasn't some bloodthirsty pirate. He was a highly professional military commander tasked with a specific mission: to retaliate for American raids into Canada, especially the burning of York, which is modern-day Toronto. The British wanted to deliver a psychological blow, to destroy and lay waste to American towns and districts. And their primary target was Washington, D.C. In August 1814, Ross landed in Maryland with about 4,500 battle-hardened troops. They faced a hastily assembled American force at the Battle of Bladensburg. The American militia was inexperienced and poorly led. What happened next was so embarrassing it became known as the Bladensburg Races, because the American forces broke and ran so quickly. The path to Washington was wide open. President James Madison and his government fled the city in a panic. His wife, Dolly Madison, famously stayed behind just long enough to save some national treasures, including a now iconic portrait of George Washington. When Ross and his troops marched into the capital on August 24th, they found it nearly deserted. Now, here's where things get interesting. Ross wasn't planning on burning the whole city. His orders were to destroy public buildings, not private property. He reportedly sat down at the deserted White House dining table and had a meal that had been prepared for President Madison, drinking the president's wine. Then, he ordered his men to pile up the furniture and set the executive mansion ablaze. They didn't stop there. The Capitol building, which housed Congress and the Library of Congress, was also torched. The Treasury and War Department buildings went up in flames. It was a systematic destruction of the symbols of American government. Eyewitnesses described a terrifying scene, with the night sky glowing red from the inferno. But here's a detail that complicates the picture of Ross as a simple villain. Before setting the fires, he sent out patrols to ensure civilians were safe. When some of his own soldiers started looting, Ross reportedly came down hard on them. He was a soldier following orders, inflicting a strategic humiliation, not a barbarian running wild. After just 24 hours, a massive thunderstorm, some called it a hurricane, rolled through, dousing the flames and forcing the British to retreat. The city was saved from complete annihilation, but the damage was done. The White House was a blackened, hollowed-out shell. So, Robert Ross had achieved his goal. He had humbled the young American nation. You'd think his name would be infamous, forever etched in American history books as the great villain of 1814. But it wasn't. And the reason why lies in what happened next. After Washington, Ross's next target was Baltimore. Baltimore was a much tougher nut to crack. It was a major port, home to many of the American privateers who had been preying on British shipping. The city was heavily fortified, protected by Fort McHenry and a large contingent of determined militia. On September 12, 1814, just a few weeks after the burning of Washington, Ross landed his troops and began the advance on the city. As he rode near the front lines to direct his men, an American sharpshooter, some say 2 young riflemen named Daniel Wells and Henry McComas, took aim. A shot rang out, and Ross was struck. The wound was mortal. He died on the way back to the fleet, his final words reportedly expressing his love for his wife and family. His death was a devastating blow to the British forces. Without their charismatic and skilled leader, the land attack on Baltimore faltered. The naval bombardment of Fort McHenry, which followed over the next 25 hours, also failed to force a surrender. This very bombardment, of course, is what inspired a young lawyer named Francis Scott Key, who was watching from a ship in the harbor, to write a poem. That poem, The Defense of Fort McHenry, would later be set to music and become the Star-Spangled Banner, the American national anthem. So, in a twist of fate, the campaign led by the man who burned the White House directly led to the creation of America's most patriotic song. The failure at Baltimore, coupled with Ross's death, marked a turning point. The British offensive stalled, and peace negotiations, which had been ongoing, gained new urgency. The War of 1812 ended a few months later with the Treaty of Ghent. And what about Robert Ross? In Britain, he was hailed as a hero. A monument was erected to him in St. Paul's Cathedral in London. His family was granted the honorific of Bladensburg to add to their name. But in America, history took a different course. The narrative quickly shifted. The focus wasn't on the man who had burned the Capitol, but on the heroic defense of Baltimore and the birth of the national anthem. The burning of Washington became a story of national resilience, of a capital rising from the ashes, symbolized by the White House being rebuilt and painted white to cover the scorch marks. Ross's death meant he couldn't become a recurring villain or a long-term bogeyman. He was a flash in the pan, a temporary terror who was quickly dispatched. American history found bigger figures to focus on, both heroes and villains. Andrew Jackson, who won the Battle of New Orleans shortly after the peace treaty was signed, became the towering hero of the war. So, Major General Robert Ross, the man who inflicted one of the greatest humiliations on the United States, effectively vanished. He became a footnote, a trivia question. He was eclipsed by his own quick death and by the powerful, patriotic story that rose from the ashes of his campaign. His story is a fascinating reminder of how history is written. It's not just about what happens, but about who tells the story, what they choose to remember, and what they choose to forget. The man who burned the White House was ultimately burned out of the history books himself. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this forgotten piece of history as fascinating as I did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories you thought you knew. See you in the next one.